Let's take a look at President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia, what we learned and what else came out of that visit. My guest tonight is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute, Trita Parsi, up late with me tonight on the Final Five. First things first, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk about this visit because we got the view from an Israeli perspective last week, right at the beginning of this visit to the Middle East. Now we're talking about the second prong of that visit, which has been talked about quite a bit. First of all, what was President Biden's objective in Saudi Arabia, and what was your take on what came out of it?
The three key things that Biden wanted to get out of this deal was a commitment by the Saudis that they would be pumping out more oil in order to push down oil prices. Secondly, he wanted to see more movement from the Saudi side towards full normalization with Israel. And thirdly, he wanted to do something to reassure the Saudis and others that the United States is going to stay in the Middle East militarily. And as a result, these countries should not reorient themselves or move a little bit closer to China and Russia. On all three counts, I think Biden failed.
When we talk about Saudi Arabia, it's a country that we have this tremendously complex relationship with, and obviously a lot of people immediately focus on the aspect of the oil. Then you add in the human rights concerns underscored by the reaction from Jamal Khashoggi's fiance, who was unhappy with the president, the fist bump. There's been a lot of focus just on that symbolic gesture there, but clearly there's much more than that at play.
Oh, there certainly are. And the White House is trying to present this as a situation in which they have to focus on interests rather than on values and human rights and what America stands for. I don't think that's fair, however, because I don't see the geopolitical gains from this trip that even could have been achieved to be sufficient for the type of humiliation that Biden subjugated himself by going to Saudi Arabia, fist bumping the crown prince after having for more than a year and a half insisted that he refuses to meet with them. I'm all in favor of having a healthy relationship with all countries, including Saudi Arabia, which is a very important country. This is not the way to go about it, though.
You mentioned the president back in 2019 saying that he wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. You don't see the president of the United States out there meeting with pariah states along the way.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't think it was right for him to say that they're not going to meet or talk. I think at the end of the day, the United States is better off when he can talk to everyone, particularly those who are in power, of course. But once you've staked out that position, you need to find ways to climb down from that in a way that you actually get something for it. I don't see that happening. And I have to say this, if part of the message that Biden was sending the Saudis, the Emiratis, and others, is that the United States is going to stay in the Middle East militarily, we have to be very clear. That may be pleasing to them, but it is not pleasing to the American public, who wants American servicemen and women to come home from the Middle East rather than sending more of them there.
You know, again, it is a deeply complex situation and relationship that we have here. And there are people who will look at this, and I suppose a question many would have would be, if we weren't in the situation we were right now with gas prices the way they were, and with this being a midterm election where that will likely motivate a lot of voters, do we think the president would have gone through with this trip, or was this something that was motivated by something greater than that?
I think, frankly, if oil prices was a key driving force of this, I think it is a driving force. But if it was the key driving force, there were other things the president could have done. For instance, going back into the Iran nuclear deal, which would have freed up a very large number of Iranian oil that has actually been pumped up, it's sitting on tankers on the sea, and it could have an immediate impact on reducing the prices that Americans are paying at the pump right now. But I think overall, if we were in that scenario that you talked about, where it wasn't this close to midterms, et cetera, I think he would have ended up in a situation in which Biden would have gone to Israel, but he would not have gone on the second leg to Saudi Arabia. Biden himself is saying that he did the Saudi Arabia trip to a large extent because the Israelis wanted him to do so. And that might be true, but that is a concession that the Saudis would be making to Israel if they normalize. It's not a concession to the United States.
So what's the next step here? I mean, is this a one and done meeting with the Saudis? I mean, is there somewhere that the administration can right this ship, or is it sort of is it for lack of a better term a lost cause with this relationship?
I think to a large extent it's a lost cause, but more than anything else, the posture that Biden is now adopting in the Middle East is itself a lost cause. It's the posture that the United States has had, Democrats and Republicans, for the last 40 years. What we need to do in the Middle East is to start withdrawing militarily, establishing relations and good talking terms with almost all of the actors there, but making sure that we do not allow them to entangle us in their internal rivalries and conflicts, because those are their fights, not our fights. What Biden is doing here, if he succeeds, is actually further embroiling the United States in the Middle East in a way that is actually not beneficial to U.S. interests.
And I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about this dynamic. Trita Parsi, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the Final Five is back right after this.